Do you ever have a plan in your head for how things are supposed to go, and then it didn't go that way? I see a lot of nodding heads. When I was in seminary, I was getting close to graduation, and my wife, Sarah, and I, we had a dream of traveling. And we wanted to do some mission work, and I was still fighting with my call to be a pastor. I kept saying, no, I don't want to be a pastor, I don't. And so I thought to myself, aha, I'll be a missionary instead. I'll go be a missionary instead of being a pastor. And a lot of people don't know this, but my wife, Sarah, she has a degree in teaching English to speakers of other languages. She doesn't speak those languages, but she teaches people how to speak English. And so she's worked with immigrants and refugees, and she even worked with international college students. And so at the end of seminary, Sarah and I were applying to all these different mission organizations. We did one in Vietnam, Turkey, and South Korea. We were really excited about those programs, among others. My favorite option was Turkey. In the city of Istanbul, there was a church that was looking for a lead pastor. And I was looking at the application, and right next to it, they were also looking for an English teacher. And I looked at it, I was like, this is it. This is God's plan right here. And I looked up from the application. I'm sitting on the couch, and I was like, on this couch is a potential pastor and a potential teacher of English. And I was like, this is perfect. You know, it's just that moment where all the puzzle pieces come together, and I thought I could see God's plan. So it was either mission work or like overseas, or I could go be a pastor up in Michigan. And at the time, I said, no, we're not going to go to Michigan. So I called up the denominational leaders. We were in a system where they would appoint you. They would like send you to a church. And I said, don't put me in a church. Don't send me. We're going overseas. We don't know where yet. Probably Turkey, because that's what's going to work. So they did not put me in a church in Michigan. Then we found out the Vietnam organization was a scam. It wasn't even a real thing. It was a scam to get young seminary students to send them some money. Yikes. But that's okay. We wanted Turkey. That was the one we were expecting. Then we found out the door closed on South Korea. They were doing some training out in Colorado, and that's when we found out that you had to be debt-free to participate in that program. And we had student loan debt, so we got disqualified. We couldn't go. So I was like, okay, that's okay, Turkey. We still have Turkey. And then we got to just a few weeks before graduation when I got that phone call. We're going to go in a different direction. And I didn't get the job. I was fresh out of seminary. I had no experience. For an international move, they really wanted someone who they knew was going to make it. They really wanted a pastor with experience. And so Sarah and I graduated, 2 master's degree and 0 jobs. And I called up the denomination and I said, is it too late to put me in a church? And they said, yes, it's too late. All the churches are full for the next year. So my first job as a seminary graduate with the highest degree I've ever earned was bagging groceries at Whole Foods. And no shade. It was a really good job. I liked that job. It was a way to provide for my family. We were able to cover the bills and continue to live our lives, but it wasn't the plan. Right? That was the part that I was upset about. It's like, God, what happened to the plan? I thought my plan was a good plan, right? How could it not be God's plan to send me to be this missionary? And it was like everything lined up so perfectly. It's like, I thought I knew what was coming. How can this not line up for your will for my life? Have you ever had that? Where you thought you knew how life was going to go and then God throws this curveball at you? Have you ever asked, God, what happened to the plan? Today, we are in part 4 of our series called Fear Over Faith. For the last month, we've been examining the holiness of God and how that helps us develop and grow in our faith. And we've been all over the Old Testament. We've been walking with Moses and Jeremiah, Isaiah. And so today, we're going to dive through Genesis chapter 22, the story of Abraham and Isaac. Now, I want you to grab your Bibles. If you want to look that up on your phone, we're in chapter 22. We're going to move around a little bit, but mostly we'll be in chapter 22. Now, if you didn't bring a Bible, but you would like one, feel free to grab a physical Bible off the back wall, or you can look it up on your phone. We want to be a BYOB church, a bring your own Bible church. And I always say this, if you bring it, I promise we will open it. So a couple weeks ago when Brian was preaching, it was amazing. I got to sit and actually enjoy the sermon. And I was looking it up on my phone, and man, it is so convenient to look up the Bible on your phone. It's so fast. I flip right to it. So whatever you're using, physical or digital, the story starts the same way. Chapter 22, verse 1. And it says, sometime later, God tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, go to the region of Moriah, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain that I will show you. Yikes. I should not have started with verse 1. What on earth? And look what it says. Do you see the way he piles on the adjectives? He's like, take your son, your only son, the one you love. Take your son and go kill him in Moriah. It's not a great start to the story, right? This is awful. And so, but to actually understand it, we need a little bit of context, right? And so some of you might know this, but back in chapter 12, we meet this guy named Abram. And Abram and his wife Sarah, they have no children. But in this moment, God comes to them and he makes him a promise. He gives him a blessing. He says, if you will obey me, if you will listen, I will give you this land to your offspring. Now, if you don't have kids, and God is promising the land is going to go to your offspring, there's kind of another promise in there, isn't there? You're going to have kids. And there is another promise. And so God changes Abram's name to Abraham. And then we jump over to chapter 15, verse 3. You don't need to jump there, but you can if you'd like to. Chapter 15, verse 3. And it says, Abram said, you have given me no children, and so a servant in my household will be my heir. And then the word of the Lord came to him, and this man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. And he took him outside, and he said, look up at the sky, count the stars, if indeed you can count them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, this is a pretty famous moment. You've probably heard something like that before, but I just love to dwell in it for a moment. Abraham is standing under the night sky, looking up at the stars. When my wife and I first moved to the UP, that was my first church. We were in Chicago, and then we moved up, and it took us all day to get up into the UP. It was like a 10-hour drive. So by the time we actually got all the way up there, it was like 2 in the morning. It was terrible, and we were so exhausted. But when we got out of the car, even though we were so burnt out, we were so exhausted, we had to pause and just look at this incredible painting across the sky. It's God's country up there, and there's a reason they call it that, It was beautiful. I might love city life, I do, but you just don't get the same stars as you do out there, right, when you're away from things. And so God tells Abraham, he's like, look at the stars. Your descendants will be more than these stars. This is the promise. And then we jump one more time over to chapter 18. Chapter 18, and there's one more moment I want to show you. So Abraham has some visitors, and they're from God, these visitors from God, and they tell him, I will return to you next year, and by that time, your wife Sarah is going to have a little boy. He's going to have a son. And then it says in verse 10, so chapter 18, verse 10, now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? And then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. And Sarah was afraid, so she lied. She said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. And would you look at that? God was right. Sarah gets pregnant. She gave birth to a son. She named him Isaac. And I love this. This is such a fun thing. Isaac, that name in Hebrew, actually means son of laughter. Like, that's the name Isaac. It can also be translated as son whose birth produces joy and happiness and laughter, because it's joy and happiness of watching God's promise come true. The messenger turns to Sarah and he says, why do you laugh? Is anything too hard for God? So what I want you to see in all of this is that Isaac is extremely precious to Abraham. Isaac is literally the physical embodiment of God's promise. God promised, you're going to have descendants, lots of them, and they have exactly one son, Isaac. So you might have noticed everything I just said, all that backdrop, all that context, actually makes what's happening in chapter 22 worse, right? So much worse. Chapter 22, it said, verse 2, take your son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain that I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. Pause. What? No questions? No comments? No concerns about what he just asked you to do? Nothing? He just gets up the next moment and loads up the donkey? Okay, let's keep reading. Abraham got up, loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance, and he said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. And Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. Now, they make it to the mountain, and they start hiking up with, they have the wood, the fire, and the knife. And then verse 7, as the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father, yes, my son, Abraham replied. The wood and fire are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? So we're hiking up this mountain, and Isaac is starting to do the math. Wait a minute. We got the wood, we got the fire. Where is the sacrifice? And so Abraham responds in verse 8. He says, Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. Now, I want you to think about this just for a second. What do you think is going through Abraham's mind in this moment? Like, number one, there's this horrific idea of losing someone who is so precious to you. But on top of that, Isaac is the plan. Right? Abraham is probably thinking, wait a minute, God, I thought this kid was how you're going to fulfill your promise to me. I thought having Isaac was how I was going to get descendants. What could be going through Abraham's mind? I mean, think about what he said to the servants. He said to the servants, wait here while we go and worship. And then what did he say? We will return. Do you think Abraham was lying? Like he was just deceiving the servants so they wouldn't know? Or do you think maybe he was just convinced somehow, some way, I'm coming back with this kid? I can't imagine what's going through his mind. And in this incredible moment, the important thing for us to realize is that Abraham knows who God is. I mean, if God can give Abraham a son, give him a son in a miraculous way when his wife is practically 100 years old, maybe, I don't know, maybe he could bring him back to life, or maybe give him a second son or something. Like, what story do you think Abraham was telling himself in this moment? And I know a lot of people cringe at this story because it's like, oh, child sacrifice, yuck. But this is such an important teaching. Abraham's fear of God, his belief in God's power leads him to hold God's gifts with an open hand. God has given, and maybe God will take away, but God has promised to give, and so I will trust. Thousands of years later, they actually write about Abraham in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11. Let's put that one on the screen. Chapter 11, verse 11. And it says, and by faith, and this is actually mostly about Sarah. It's by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. Let's stay on that sentence just for a second. She considered him faithful who made the promise. The one who made the promise is God, and she considers him faithful. And then it finishes in verse 12. And so from this one man, we're talking about Abraham now, from this one man, and he as good as dead, he is old, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. What I want you to catch here is that the promise of God is tied to the power of God. The raw, infinite, and incredible presence that makes us shake in our boots with fear is the same power that reassures us if God makes you a promise, you can trust that promise because he is God. Sometimes I think I spend my entire Christian life learning to unclench my hand Does that make sense, right? If I say that, I've used this metaphor before, but it's so apt in my life to live with an open hand. Every time something goes wrong, every time something unexpected happens or something that wasn't according to my plan, I want to close my fingers. I want to grab for control. But if God is God and we remember his power and his promise, sometimes we can unclench and live with an open hand. So let me ask, do you trust God enough to hold his gifts with an open hand? Or are there things in your life you want to hold back from God? Are there things that you do not want to trust on the altar? The story keeps going in chapter 22, verse 8. And it says, so Abraham answers, God will provide the land. And then verse 9, he says, when they reached the place that God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. And he bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And then they reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But an angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. I've heard this story like 1,000 times, and every time I get a little clinch in the middle. It's like, come on. But there is one piece I wanted to show you in case you didn't catch it. The angel that calls out in verse 11, it says, the angel of the Lord. And I learned this just recently. I didn't know this. But when it says an angel of the Lord, that's a regular old angel. But if it says the angel of the Lord, there's quite a bit of evidence scholars have pointed out that is pointing at Jesus. The angel of the Lord is Jesus. Jesus before he came in human form. Like before he shows up in the New Testament, this is Jesus. The fancy word for that is pre-incarnate Jesus. Now you might notice a theme. Jesus is showing up almost every week. Jesus was the voice coming from the fire with Moses. Jesus was on the throne in Isaiah's vision. Jesus is all over the Old Testament teaching us about how the fear of God is a good thing that helps us grow. And so to finish the story, because we've got to finish the story, verse 13, it says, Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns, and he went over and he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. And so Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The Lord will provide. The good news for us today is that we get from God's word is that God provides what we need. And I don't want you to miss what is happening here, okay? Imagine this. Abraham is standing over the altar, holding a knife with his son Isaac on the table. Isaac, who holds all of his hope, all of his earthly plans, all of his designs for the future, for his entire legacy. Sarah does not have any other sons. So what's really going on here is Abraham is saying, I trust you, God, more than my earthly plan. Like he needs Isaac to have this legacy, for his legacy to continue, for that plan in his head to work out. He needs Isaac. I need this kid. And the scriptures tells us he loved his son. Let there be no doubt. Abraham loved Isaac. But the altar is where he trades his lesser need, his finite earthly plan for the greatest and only need. When the angel of the Lord stops Abraham, he says, I know you fear God, because you've not withheld your son from me. You have not held on to the plan in your head. You have not held on to your highest earthly hope. You have feared God. You have trusted God. You have loved God above all other things. And that need, that truth, applies to every single one of us in the room. In all of our lives, the altar is the place where we exchange the lesser needs for our greater and only need, which is Jesus. Let me see if I can explain it like this. I recently heard this from another pastor, and I thought it was so helpful. As some of you know, I have 5 children, and my oldest is 8 years old. He's in 3rd grade. And I do want to say, all my children are very bright. They're so smart, and I'm so proud of them, and it's been such a joy in my life to watch my children struggle and overcome and be challenged and to succeed and grow and just kind of flourish in their schoolwork. Now, my oldest is in 3rd grade. If I were to take an advanced placement calculus test and put it down in front of my 3rd grader, what would happen? He would fail, right? He would fail that test. Now, this is why I think we need to stop saying the church is a place of second chances. Follow me on this. Sometimes in the church, we'll say, well, the church, this is where you get a second chance. But the third grader who failed the AP calculus test, what's going to happen if I give him a second chance at that test? He's going to fail it again, right? He's going to fail the test a second time and fail it again and again. He doesn't need a second chance or a third chance or 100th chance. He needs someone else to take the exam. Yes? When we face the test of life, the test of morality and mortality, there's a radical shift when we realize we can't do it without God. If God gave me a second chance to live a perfect life, I'm going to fail it again. If he gave me a third chance, I'm going to fail it again and again and again. I need someone else to take the test. When I say that God provides what you need, I don't mean he's going to provide for the plan in your head. What I mean is, when I say God provides, what I mean is he is the thing you need. The angel of the Lord says to Abraham, you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. And that phrase might tickle your memory. Your son, your only son. And the reason for that is you hear the same idea in one other place in the Bible, Romans chapter 8, verse 32. Except in that moment, they're talking about God, and who did not withhold his son, his only son, whom he loved, who came and died on the cross for all of us, Jesus. We need Jesus to take the exam for us. We need to take all our lesser needs, the plans and purposes of our own design, the striving and seeking and churning, trying to get God to love us. We need to take it all and put it on the altar. All your sin, all your brokenness, all your shame, all your doubts, all of your burdens, put it all on the altar. The altar is the place where we exchange everything we think we need, our striving, everything we have in this world, the only thing, and we exchange it for the only thing we actually need, which is Jesus. So let me ask you the hard question of Abraham. What do you need to put on the altar? What are you holding back from God? For some of us, it's bad things. We're clinging to bad things. There's sin and shame, and you are determined to never let it go. Some of us hold on to our brokenness with an iron grip because someone somewhere somehow told you you are not allowed to heal. You are not allowed to grow past it, that you are stuck. And so my challenge to you today, put it on the altar. Whatever brokenness you're carrying inside, you think you can never grow past, put it on the altar. Or maybe it's not shame. Maybe it's not brokenness, but it's unrepentant sin. Something you know you're not supposed to be doing. Something that goes against the teachings of Jesus. It goes against the way of God, but you really like it. And you're holding on to it because you don't want to let it go. Please put it on the altar. Or maybe it's a good thing in your life. Something you love. And you pour all your hope and your happiness into it, your job, your family, your home, or even just the plan in your head of how life is supposed to go. With trust and fear and awe in the power and promise of God who loves you. Put it on the altar. Hold nothing back from our God in heaven. When I was in high school, I gave my life to Jesus, and I told this story at Byron Days, so if you were there, you probably heard parts of this. But basically, I went to this big Christian rock festival. It was called Ichthus, and it's like camping and music and speakers, and one of the nights, they had a guy out there who was talking about keys. Now, at the time, I was already a church kid. I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor. I had great friends in church. I loved church. It was so much fun. I sang the songs. I prayed the prayers. I knew all the answers for Sunday school. On paper, by all appearances, I was the perfect church boy. But the truth is, I was a phony. I wasn't lying about loving church. I did love church. It was a lot of fun to go to church. But it was just something I did on the outside. And it didn't mean anything on the inside. I wanted to pray to God like they taught me in Sunday school. I wanted to talk to God, but I'll just be totally honest with you. I would go home, and I would go in my room and close the door like the Bible talks about, and I would lay on my bed and try to pray to God, and sometimes it just felt like I was talking to the ceiling. It was awkward, and I didn't know how to do it. And so I go to this thing. It's a church event, and I hear this guy talk about keys. And like I said at Byron Days, I don't remember the man's name. I don't remember the name of his ministry. I don't even remember what church he was from. But he talked about keys. And he talked about how we need to give all of our keys to God. And then he held up a set of keys just like this. And he's like, look, some of us, we like to give God some of our keys. I'll give you Sunday morning. You can have Sunday morning. Maybe I'll even give you Wednesday, right? I'll do some volunteering or something. I'll give God that. But Monday morning or Friday night, well, I don't know. Those are my keys. This is my life. I don't want to be a Christian on those days. I'll give God some of the keys to my life. Maybe I won't use swear words, and I'll volunteer twice a month at the soup kitchen, but the key to my sexual ethics, or the key to my budget, or the key to my calendar, no. I want to keep those keys. And the speaker on the stage, he challenged us to give everything to Jesus. Not just part of our life, but everything to Jesus. To put it all on the altar. And so that's what I did. I sat on a blanket with a group of my friends who were all around me, and I closed my eyes and I prayed. And in that moment, I gave my life wholly and completely. All the keys, every piece. And what's crazy is that my life on the outside did not look that different. Right? Like I had always been the church boy, but now I was the Jesus boy. Right? I still sang the same songs, but now I was singing them to someone. I still prayed the same prayers, but now I knew there was someone who was listening to me, and it was as if I had been talking to a wall, but then they raised the blinds, and it's not a wall, but a window, and I could see there was someone on the other side, and I realized not just that there is something out there, that there is someone who exists, but that something cares about me, that what is out there loves me so much. He loves me so much that he came into this world as a human being, as a baby in the manger, who lived and suffered and died for me on the cross. And since that moment, I was 14, the plan in my head has been wrong over and over and over. I keep thinking I know how life's going to go, and God keeps taking that away from me. He keeps saying, no, that's not how it's going to work. But God has always been with me. He's the only thing I need, and the same is true for you. And I know a lot of you have experienced this truth. You have understood the grace of God. Many of you have put your faith in God. You have put your entire life on the altar. You've been baptized. You have claimed Jesus' name. You have washed everything else away. And some of you, even those who have been in the church for a long time, you've always trusted God, sort of. Some of us trust God as long as he follows the plan in my head. I will trust God as long as things in my life are good. Because for a lot of us, there are things we will not put on the altar. Keys that we want to keep for ourselves. After second service, we are going to have an opportunity for baptism. And if you feel you are ready to put everything on the altar, to proclaim Jesus as your Lord, I hope that you step forward for baptism. But I also want to expand it because I know a lot of us in this room are already baptized. For some of us, we have never taken that step, or we have already taken that step. We've given our life to Jesus. We put everything on the altar, but we keep trying to take stuff off the altar. We keep trying to get our keys back from Jesus. We keep wanting to say, no, I need that. For some of us, it's Jesus, take the wheel, but follow my GPS. Right? We're good with him being in charge as long as he goes the way we want him to go. For some of us, we've already been baptized. We need to remember our baptism. We have to take a moment and take a step of faith and put everything back on the altar. Remember what you did that day when you were washed clean. And so often, it feels like trusting God is a constant process of unclenching my fingers. I keep wanting to grab control. I want to take my keys back. I want to take stuff off the altar. But Abraham teaches us that the power of God and the promise of God go together. And he shows us in a dramatic way that God provides what we need. He is what we need. When I graduated seminary, the wheels fell off the plan for my life. I wasn't prepared for 4 rejections in a row. And it really sent me into a spiral. I'm not going to get into it all now. It's a whole big story. But God used, we were in Chicago, and we ended up living there 9 months that we weren't expecting. It was a longer time. And God used those extra months in Chicago in my life in a huge way. And one of the things God has done consistently in my life, he has held control out of reach until I stop reaching. He says, no, not until you trust me. So let me leave you with these 2 questions. Have you ever had a plan in your head for how things should go, and then it didn't go that way? And are you ready in this moment today to trust God enough to hold his gifts with an open hand, to give God all the keys, to put it all back on the altar? Let's pray.